Hello and welcome to the third and final part of our analysis of iCAT10. As we said, iCAT10 marks the last lap towards CAT with the release of 15 mocks before it. We saw in the first two parts that iCAT10 is a fairly simple mock with an average difficulty per question mapped at around 1.6. Just to clarify once again, the average difficulty is nothing but the arithmetic mean of the difficulty level of each question. So each question has an LOD of 1 to 3, where 1 is easy and 3 is difficult. So this is more an indicator of what the difficulty level per question was. We saw that this mock had a very easy English section and a just below par DILR section, which could be called moderate. In Quant, we can see that the average difficulty is close to 1.6 and hence Quant also has been classified as an easy section. However, where does this compare as compared to the actual CAT? In the actual CAT, the difficulty level is somewhere between 1.6 to 1.65. Hence, again this was a particular mock where the Quant was more or less at par with the actual exam. So if I were to look at the entire mock as a totality, I would say that it had a DILR and Quant sections which are more or less similar to what you would find in the actual exam, but it had a verbal which was very simple compared to the exam. This might also happen in a real life scenario. So how do we analyze the Quant section compared to the VA or the DILR sections? Before we go into this topic level breakup here, first let's just consider the actual breakup of easy, medium, tough questions in Quant, which is more or less well defined. In the actual exam, there are anywhere between 15 to 17 easy questions, 3 to 5 tough questions, and the remaining 15 to 17 again can be classified as moderate questions. Now, if you look at this, the breakup indicates that diversifying your risk across various chapters becomes extremely important. Now, what do I mean by this? Everybody knows that in CAT you need to have more than 20 attempts or somewhere close to 20 to 23 attempts in order to clear the cutoff. Here, if I look at this, even if you do all these easy questions, you will not be able to clear the cutoff, which means that you need to rely on these moderate questions to try and clear the cutoff. So, assuming that these easy questions, even if you do not have strengths in certain areas, these easy questions will help you arrive, will actually get solved and you will be able to attempt 16 or 15 questions here. What about the remaining questions? So of these moderate questions, typically you would try and solve the questions which are from your strengths or your good areas. What if you do not get questions from those areas? What if most of the moderate questions are, let's say, from geometry and modern math, whereas you are not so good in those? What do you do in that case? That is where it is extremely important to have certain strengths, yes, but try and be at least fairly competent in nearly all the chapters so that you know at least the bare bones basics. If you do that, you will be able to attempt at least half of the questions in this group here and clear the cutoff. Let's have a look at the actual section here and test our hypothesis. So if we look at this section, we observe, as we said, that the average section LOD was 1.6. Now in Quant, there is a very easy thing as far as analysis is concerned, that there are 4 clear-cut areas: arithmetic, algebra, geometry and modern math. So you can actually analyze your strengths and weaknesses for each of those areas. Here when we look at this mock, there is a very clear-cut distinction. Arithmetic and algebra were both lower than the section average, which means these were the 2 easiest parts of this mock. Whereas geometry and modern math were the 2 toughest parts, with geometry actually being the toughest. So this was the part which brought up the difficulty level of the section, whereas this was the part which brought down the difficulty level of the section. So clearing the cutoff would have depended to a large extent on how well you did here. Whereas if you were banking on this, then you might actually have found this section slightly tougher if you felt that these two were the areas where you would claim maximum marks, because this had the toughest questions. Let's have a look at each area individually. You can see that arithmetic had the maximum questions at 12, followed by algebra at 9, then geometry at 7, and finally modern math at 6. Within this, we can see that arithmetic had 7 questions out of 12, that's more than half, which were either sitters or easy. So here when I look at this, at least half of these questions were eminently doable. At the same time, when I consider these 5 questions which are considered moderate, generally observe that in arithmetic people find the moderate questions to be simpler than the moderate questions of say modern math or geometry. This is again relative between chapters. So a moderate question from let's say profit and loss will most likely be simpler than a moderate question from say PH. That is where the strategy for arithmetic as far as this mock is concerned would be to try and maximize your attempts. As many questions as you would do here would help you get closer to the cutoff. When I check the same hypothesis with algebra, I again see that nearly half the questions or less than half the questions were easy or sitters. So these definitely should have been attempted. Among these 5, there would be the moderate questions in algebra might involve a lot of concepts or applications. So here you needed to be selective. That is where in algebra you needed to have a combination of maximizing the easy questions and being selective about the moderate questions. Contrary to this, if I look at geometry, I observe that out of these 7 questions, only 3 could be called easy or sitters, whereas there were 2 questions that were moderate, and the only 2 tough questions in the entire section were in geometry. So on the whole, if I look at this, this was definitely a tough section or a tough part of the section, and here the key aspect would have been to select the 3 easiest questions and try and get all of them correct. Using the same logic for modern math, we again observe that out of these 6, only 2 were sitters. There was no other easy question. The rest were moderate. So again here question selection would become very, very important. So when we notice this, now when we analyze our strengths and weaknesses, we can very clearly observe that even within the section, you can have different strategies for different areas and try and use those strategies to maximize your attempts. If I observe, I will notice that there are 10 sitters in the mock and 6 easy questions, which means I have 16 easy questions in all. I would definitely try and attempt somewhere around 15 of these. If I look at the difficult questions, again I have 16 moderate questions. I again have 16 moderate questions. So even if I assume that I am doing 2/3 of these, I would potentially have anywhere around 10 to 12 attempts. And then there were 2 tough questions in geometry. So even assuming that I don't solve these or I just skip these, it was very, very possible to try and attempt anywhere between 25 to 27 questions in this section. So for this section, if you were to ask me, I would say anywhere close to 25, 26 attempts would have to be a good performance. Now, as we said, there were 10 sitters. So our faculty have created a list of these 10 sitters. As we always say, this list by itself is neither exhaustive nor is it absolute. What do I mean by this? If you sit along with your faculty or individually, you might observe that there are more questions that you find to be sitters. Also, there are questions in this list itself that you may find difficult, which is absolutely fine. However, this list has also been given for you to think and create similar listings for yourself where for each quant section you note down the questions that you thought were sitters or you thought were tough, and then analyze whether you attempted them. If yes, did you get them right? If no, why did you not attempt them? If you got marked the wrong answer, where did you go wrong, and so on. Because these are the questions that you can solve pretty quickly and get maximum marks. Finally, in this section, we move to the last graph, which is the difficulty level. This is something we saw in the earlier two videos as well. So here we've mapped the difficulty level of each question from 67 to 100. The blue lines indicate the MCQs, the pink or orange ones indicate the theta or any questions. So as you can see, somewhere around the second half, which is after question 85 here, you can see that the section starts becoming tougher. In the last 15 questions, we have 8 moderate questions and 10 tough questions. So 10 out of 15 questions in the last 15 are actually moderate to tough, whereas there are only 5 easy questions scattered here. So if I go chronologically, this test actually might prove helpful because the easier questions are in the first half. But some people generally tend to think that a quant section will have the easiest questions at the end, or the easy questions will be bunched together or scattered. Yes, all of these do happen, but there is no one rule. So here, if you observe, these last 15 questions would actually have slowed you down, and it was important for you to try and search for these 5-6 questions here which were easy enough. On the other hand, when I look from 67 to 85, that is these 19 questions, I observe that there are these chunks here, 3, then 2, then again 2, again 2 here, and then these single. So a lot of 3, 6, 5, 7, 9, 11 easy questions in this first half itself. Also, no tough question in this part. Everything else is fairly moderate. So this is where I would have been able to maximize my attempts. So when I look at this, this is basically an imaginary boundary that tells me where I should have been maximizing my attempts and where I should possibly have been searching for the easier questions. Of course, as we said, there is no set rule. Each mock has its own flow. Each mock has its own pattern of questions. So you need to try and look at this every time and compare your attempts and see how you did in this. So it is more for self-evaluation than anything else. Let's have a look at a couple of questions before we wind up this particular analysis. For instance, if I look at, let's say, question 71. Now this is something which I may not really be able to do unless I know the properties of logs. If I know these properties, if I know what c raised to log b to the base a means, then yes, it's fine. Or how do I interpret this? Then yes, again you can solve the question. But if you cannot, then this question is virtually unsolvable. You cannot substitute options and really solve it. The only thing you can do is realize that this is half. So this will be half plus something, and accordingly move from there, but that is not too much help. On the other hand, similarly, if I look at this question which is on surds, I would notice this is 2 raised to, I think 2 raised to 7, and this is 2 cubed. So express both in terms of powers of 2 and you get your answer. So that is a very, very easy thing to do. One question here that you should really look at is this: x cube minus px square plus qx plus 10 is divisible by x plus 5. There's this other polynomial divisible by x minus 3. What is the value of 3p minus q? Now, there is no real algebra required here. The only thing required here is something known as the remainder theorem. For any polynomial, if let's say a polynomial fx is divisible by a, then f of a is 0. That is the only thing you need to remember. So if I know that this is divisible by x plus 5, I substitute x equal to minus 5 because this is basically f of x minus a. If it is divisible by f of x minus a, then divisible by x minus a, sorry, then f of a is 0. So here a becomes minus 5, substituted, you'll get one linear equation in P and Q. Similarly, substitute 3 here, you'll get another linear equation in P and Q. Solve those two equations, you'll get this value. So here, there are certain questions here where you actually need to know certain properties. All these questions, 70, 71, 72, you need to know certain properties, you will get your actual answer. On the other hand, when I look at question 69, you don't really need properties, you need to be meticulous because there are 3 formulae here or 3 correlations here. Understand where the brackets are placed, apply BODMAS, start from the innermost bracket. Look at question 75. This is something where you definitely need to be careful. A lot of students will make a mistake here. In this equation, they'll first cancel out x plus 2. So they'll end up writing x square plus 1 equal to 4 plus 1. Then they'll cancel out the 1 and say x square equal to 4. So x equal to plus minus 2. Then they'll say that, oh, x is not equal to 2. So x is equal to 2. Or x not equal to minus 2, so x equal to 2, that's my answer. However, you cannot do this here. Because x is not equal to minus 2, my denominator is not 0, so I first verify by multiplying this. And then check. If I get the correct answer, fine, I have absolutely no issue, but be careful when you have questions like these on quadratic. Let's say we have a look at question 80. A shopkeeper sold 15 pens of type X which cost him rupees 6 and 20 pens of type Y which cost him rupees 5. So the cost of the first pen was 90, the cost of the second was 100. So he sold them, his overall cost was 190. He earned an overall profit of 30%. 30% of 190 will be 57. So his total revenue was 247. Now he sold 15 pens at X% profit, which means that it was 90 into whatever 1 plus X by 100 plus 20 into 500 into 1 plus Y by 100. Now when I open this, I'll essentially be left with 0.9x plus Y equal to 57, which is the profit. I now just need to substitute the options here and get the answer. If I look at this, it is very evident that substituting this will give me the correct answer. You can verify it with actually solving it algebraically. So there are questions where you need concepts, there are questions where you can substitute values, but you need to do a little bit of manipulation before that. On the whole, if we were to summarize, we can say that this was a fairly representative section as far as CAT was concerned. It was very reasonably possible to attempt close to 25 to 26 questions in this section. On the whole, if we were to look at this mock, we had a very easy verbal section with 22 good attempts or 25 good attempts, sorry. A DILR section with anywhere around 18 attempts and then another quant section with close to 25 attempts. So on the whole, if we were to take a total count of the attempts, anywhere between 68 to 70 attempts would be a good performance as far as this mock is concerned. The analysis for all the earlier mocks are available on our official YouTube channel given in the link below. You can subscribe to this channel by clicking this link. By hitting the bell button, you get access or you get notifications every time a new video is put up. You can put in your comments, feedback or questions on the thread below the video. Keep watching. Wish you all the very best and thank you.